Okay, hello everybody. Hi. Welcome to the last session of the day. Well, last session before the film festival, I guess. The last talk session of the day. How's everybody doing? Good. Great. Awesome. Okay, so my name is Kaho and I work with Animal Alliance Asia, and I will be very honored to be part of this session as a moderator. Today, this session is successful international collaboration and partnership in our movement. And in this session, we're gonna have a fireside chat about collaboration and partnership on the international scale, using Faunalytics, which is based in the United States, and Good Growth, which is based in China, as an example. So we have leaders from each organization, Brooke and Ying, as speakers. And they're going to be talking about what has worked and what hasn't in their partnership in the last few years. And they're going to be sharing their learnings from their partnership. And they're going to be also giving us some recommendations for groups and organizations who are looking to have partnership with other organizations. Okay, so before we move on to the conversation, I would like to kind of see who is in the room. So who here works only in one country? Just in one country? Raise your hand. Great, awesome, we have lots. So you are probably what we call local organization. Who here works internationally in multiple countries? Okay, maybe some less hands up, but this is a good mix of audience. So I would encourage you to think about how you can apply what they're going to talk about, the learnings from their partnership, and how you can apply those into your own partnership building. Okay, so we're gonna get our speakers introduce themselves. Jane, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Kaho. Hi, I'm Ying. My background is pretty mixed, so I've worn different hats over the last decade or so that I've been working. I first started off as a climate campaigner in China, and then I moved into working on startups, led my own for 5 years, sold that, not in any very profitable way. And then started freelancing, doing different projects, trying to figure out what to do next. And one of my clients was Faunalytics, so we'll go into that more later on. And then as that work grew, I guess I transitioned from a freelancer to an entrepreneur again and starting the organization Good Growth. We at first focused mostly on research, market research on Asia. And then now we actually have like organizations that have seen our research and want us to help them apply the research on their strategy. This ranges from like companies to advocacy organizations. So we're also starting to expand into a strategy consultancy. I'll leave it there for now. Brooke.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brooke Haggerty, and I have been doing animal protection work for the last 15 plus years in a variety of capacities, everything from grassroots to event planning to legislative work. And my background is primarily focused on nonprofit management, so operations and fundraising and everything that's necessary to make programmatic work possible. I am the executive director of Faunalytics, which is a US-based NGO that conducts and shares research to support the animal protection movement. Most of our work involves original research, where we conduct independent studies to support animal advocacy with a focus on farmed animals. We also have a research library where we house study summaries of over 6,000 external research articles across every continent, every animal topic, and the library also has content in multiple languages. And we also have a research support program where we support advocates more one-on-one. If you need help finding data or conducting your own research, we're here to help you. And so our goal is really to make sure that animal advocates have the data they need to be as effective as possible in whatever type of work you're doing. And so I have the honor of making sure that our researchers and the brilliant people on our team have the resources they need to do everything we can to support you.
Great, thank you both for that introduction. I'm such a huge fan of both Good Growth and Faunalytics, so I'm so happy to be here learning about your partnership. Okay, so speaking of partnership, let's hear how the partnership between Good Growth and Faunalytics started.
Yeah, so Faunalytics, we're US based, and in the past we had done a lot of research focused on the United States. But our goal was not to just focus on one aspect of the movement. We really wanted to do more to support animal advocates around the world, because we all know that animal suffering is not limited to one country. And so we had done international research in the past. We did a study in 2018 looking at attitudes toward farmed animals in BRIC countries, so Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But we hadn't really made it a concentrated strategic focus of ours. And then a few years later, we decided that we wanted to try to do more in China and Southeast Asia. And we didn't want to just come in and do that research as a US organization. And so we needed help on a study we were doing in China. And that is how we met Ying, who helped us with one of the studies we were doing. And what started off as you helping with, I think, the analysis piece of the research project ultimately turned into a 4+ year collaboration with Good Growth. And that's how it started.
It's been 4 years.
I think it's almost been 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to also share from your perspective how the collaboration has impacted your work?
Yeah, sure. I guess we can make it like more concrete and go through some of the work that we've done together. So as Brooke said, I started off as a contractor working on one project, doing analysis for one project. Then I think we moved on to growing that a little bit to do another China project where I led that project. And then we wanted to do more Asia work. And I was like, I can't do that on my own. And then started bringing on my co-founder, Ella, and then building out this organization to lead now all of Faunalytics Asia projects, as well as 1 or 2 international studies. So just to give a sense of the types of studies, anywhere from like consumer attitudes towards plant-based in China, to attitudes towards animal welfare, to a recent study that we published, an international study of different strategies that advocates are taking around the world. And then right now we have a few more in progress that looks at how advocates actually use research and data, and Asia advocates in particular. We also have one that looks at how we might collaborate with other movements in Southeast Asia. So a lot of exciting new work coming up. Yeah, and that's how our partnership has blossomed so far.
Yeah, super exciting. And usually once your studies are done, they're published on Faunalytics website, usually?
Yeah, that's actually something we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
They are, no, that's okay. They're published on faunalytics.org, but Good Growth also does publish them on your website. And that's something where it's a learning opportunity for us as a collaborative partnership, is how you actually go about rolling out your completed project. But they are available on faunalytics.org or Good Growth's website.
Okay, amazing. So check them out if you're interested, and they're usually very accessible too. So I will highly recommend checking them out. And yeah, I also want to encourage everybody to keep just asking, typing your questions on Wova app throughout the session. I will be monitoring the questions and ask the speakers if they're relevant to the topic that they're discussing. So please do so. But for now, I don't see many at the moment, so I will save them for later. So if we can maybe talk a little bit more about benefits of your partnership from each perspective.
Sure, I can get started. I think I can talk about it in sort of different stages. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I was just an individual, and I was pretty burnt out from the startup. So I was like, I just want to be free, do my own thing. And I did one study on China, and then Faunalytics was looking for a contractor. So then I was able to kind of snowball the first study that I did, start working on Faunalytics study, and then work on another one that I led myself. I think for me, that was very helpful because it gave me sort of affirmation that there is demand. And, I'm going to use some kind of business startup language because that's where I'm from. But yeah, that there was demand for this work. And so I could start to shift. So I was still working on other projects, but because there was this demand, I started to shift my focus more and more into the animal side of things. And then And then the second thing is, if you're working as a freelancer and you're doing project-based work, like your income is not very stable. So once we started looking at doing more of the Asia studies, it also meant that I was able to plan ahead a little bit more, and yeah, have more of like a pipeline and roadmap for what is the work that we're going to do. And another thing on this is that I definitely thought about this, which is every time you do a new research project, you have to fundraise for it. And as a new organization, we didn't have the network. People didn't know what good growth was. I have to explain myself all the time. And then I saw Faunalytics, and it's like they have a team doing it, maybe a small team doing it, but like they have a system, they have this huge spreadsheet, and I'm like, do we really need to learn how to do fundraising, or is there something more we could be doing with Faunalytics to leverage their expertise and their process that they've established for, they've been around for 20 years, whereas we had been around for maybe 2 at the time. And so we could just focus more on the research while leveraging the kind of infrastructure that Faunalytics had already built.
And you complemented our skill sets as well. So we had researchers on our team, but we didn't have a qualitative expert, for example. So partnering with Good Growth really allowed us to increase our organizational capacity without hiring. So Faunalytics might be bigger than Good Growth, but we're not a huge organization, and we can't afford an employer of record to hire in multiple countries around the world. So the collaboration really allowed us to increase our staff capacity and our programmatic outputs without the added cost that comes with that. So I would say the complementary skill set, growing our team in a more cost-efficient way, and of course the cultural knowledge that you had that we didn't.
I think another sort of unexpected benefit was that I realized at the last AVA, the international conference that happens in the US, is that like a lot of people, including funders, started to know Good Growth. And I'm like, but I've never spoken to you, and they had this positive image of us. And like, how do you know that? And I think we really have to thank Faunalytics for that, because Brooke has been spreading the word about our work.
Spreading the Good Growth gospel.
Yeah, and obviously you have to do good work, but I think the other thing that we were able to leverage was not just like the brand of Faunalytics, but also the trust that they had with their donors that has been established for over 2 decades. And so that kind of positive testimonial can carry a lot of weight for someone who's so small like us that nobody had heard of previously.
I think that's something to think about with collaboration, regardless of country, is what is the reputation of the organization you're partnering with. Not that we all need perfect reputations, but for us, as a research organization, quality is extremely important. If we lose our reputation for quality, we lose everything. And so we learned very quickly, partnering with Ying, that they also had that focus and that emphasis. And so we learned pretty quickly that there was a level of trust in what we wanted to do and accomplish and the quality of the work we wanted to do for the movement. So kind of that foundational level where we were both operating on the same page, I think, is important when you're thinking about collaborating with others.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so it looks like you've been having such a mutually beneficial relationships over the last few years. And yeah, I think that has been contributing to a lot in terms of building that stronger and sustaining relationship. I see a few questions that are interesting, but I think I will save them for later. They will be probably a good conversation, so I'll save them for later. But please continue sending those questions in. Yeah, so now that we talked about how you've kind of got benefits out of this relationship, how can others do the same? What are the relationship kind of process look like for between local and international organizations?
Sure. So we talked about this, like what are the kind of the stages of partnership, and we realized that there's actually a pretty strong sort of like echo with just romantic relationships. So I will describe the way that our partnership developed in 3 stages. So first is like dating, when it's like casual, and then you start like getting serious, and then you get committed. So 3 stages, starting with dating. So I think we can think about dating like projects. You work on projects together. If it fails, it's fine. Like no, I mean, it's not great. You have a bad date, but then you can walk away, right? And then at this stage, what you really want to be looking for is compatibility. And that can be on multiple levels. So usually starts with complementary strengths and weaknesses. So we mentioned some different things like Faunalytics had very strong quantitative researchers. We had very strong qualitative researchers. We had different geographical focuses. So that's usually the start, right? There's something that attracts you about this other person or organization. And then the second thing you should start looking at when you're dating is obviously personality and whether you complement each other. Do you like each other? That is important too. So it's not just about the benefits, but also do you enjoy that working relationship? And the third thing that I think is really important is openness and the ability to be honest and challenge each other. And I think it's probably important to mention here that there's a power element here, right? We were a very small organization, and they were the client, they were the ones with the money. So I think it's not clear that we can disagree with the client, right? Especially when they have the wallet, and I think part of this also goes back to personality. So I think Joe, who was the former research director, and I had that very kind of intellectually honest vibe. And so we would actively challenge each other in terms of the methodology, right? I would propose something that was very qualitative, something that Faunalytics had never tried before, and she would push back. But if I was able to come back with reasons, she was open to trying something new, or like she would think about how could we make this. So often I would come in with kind of a more business-minded research methodology, and then she would help think about, okay, how can we add the rigor to it so that it could meet Faunalytics standards, which usually is more on like an academic standard as well. Yeah, I think that helped us learn, but also I think produce studies that were a lot more like actionable and usable, but at the same time had the level of rigor so that different stakeholders would trust the findings. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think personality is important if you're going to collaborate in more than a one-off way, right? So when we're in the dating phase, we're figuring that out, and we realized how well we jive together and that we work together in a very honest and trusting and, it just worked. Like, you've been in a relationship where it's just like, why is this so much work? And then others that are a lot more smooth. And that was when we realized, oh, this could get serious. Like, I could be with this person. And so that's when we started to think about a little bit, I think, the power dynamic that you mentioned. So at first we started off as Good Growth is our contractor. We're going to give them a piece of a study that we need done. And then it progressed as we were getting more serious to Good Growth becoming the lead on a study. So when you're thinking about a collaboration, I think it's really important to outline clearly the roles that each of you are going to bring to the table and what you're going to do in a way that makes sense to both of you. And that was something that I think made us start thinking a little bit more about the future versus just the present and the current dates we were going on.
Yeah. So we started to get more sort of integrated, and I started taking a more leading role in these studies. But there's pros and cons. Obviously, I now have more ownership, but then I also have more responsibility. And it was pretty smooth for a couple of studies, and then we did the International Advocate Study, which was a huge study. I think we surveyed like almost 200 organizations around the world.
84 countries.
Right. Yeah, that was, and so many logistics. Thank you, Ella, for dealing with all of that. And then it was a very long study. There were many different people involved, and a lot of things were like lost in the communication. So also note that this is a long distance relationship, right? So we have people of different time zones. People are sitting in on different meetings, maybe not taking notes. Sometimes there are huge delays of months. And we realized that the initial concept of the project and the design that we ultimately did, which was maybe like 3 to 6 months gap in between, wasn't matching. And we realized this kind of quite late. And so every time we put in a draft, there would be so many comments. Joe was like, why is it this? we didn't agree on this. Have you checked the project proposal? Also, Joe is pretty direct, right? And so I was freaking out because I'm like, oh wow, we really messed this one up. They really hate our work. And I remember Ella was like, oh my God, we're gonna lose them as a client. There she is. And yeah, I think we were really worried that was the end. Ultimately, it turned out to be, I think, one of your favorite studies and one that many advocates have already started using and donors have started using. But I think so we worked through it and we got the study out. It's a high quality study. But I think what we realized from that is, when things start going wrong, that's like where the relationship is really challenged. And the fact that we were able to work through this, I think, was a signal that we had transitioned from just sort of like a client-contractor relationship where it's like, hey, why are you not delivering? This is not good enough, we're gonna fire you kind of thing, to like, no, we are in a relationship together. If things are going wrong, we're gonna be working together to get through this. And so I think that's when we transitioned from, we're not dating anymore, we are getting serious.
And that also led to us realizing, like, are we ready for this? So as you think about collaboration, it's like when you're dating and putting yourself out there, like, do you have your act together? Like, are you ready to be accountable to another person? Do you have it together to where you can get serious with someone?
Done the inner work yet?
Yeah. Are you like in that place in your life? And so for us, we realized as we experienced some of these issues that we at Faunalytics didn't actually have a great solid foundation to support good growth as you experience these challenges. And so even though we'd been around for 20 plus years, we were still kind of building a lot of our foundation as we went, and we didn't have a great project management system in place. We used to do, 1, 2, maybe 3 studies a year, and now we're doing almost a study a month. And so we ran into a lot of issues just on the project management side of things and realized, oh, we need to get our act together if we're gonna be in this together. And so that was a real learning opportunity. So as you embark on collaborations, thinking about, are you in a place where you can be the best you can be for your partner? Like, do you have your own act together so that you don't run into these issues along the way and stumble with them, even though we got through it together?
So we did manage to exit the getting serious stage into this committed relationship. And I think this is where it really does feel like a partnership. It's something that's ongoing. And clearly we transitioned from this idea of being a client or contractor to being a partner. And I think that comes with several different activities that you have to prepare to start working on. Maybe, yeah, you can go ahead.
So a concrete example is, okay, so we started off, Good Growth was a contractor who helped us with an aspect of a study. And then it advanced to them leading a study. But there's still that power imbalance here. And so the next phase of our relationship was, let's have Good Growth help us choose the studies. So instead of us saying, we want to study this topic, run with it, it was help us figure out what our research agenda should look like. Because again, we want to honor the local expertise they bring, the general expertise you bring. And so it went from them just being handed a project to them actually helping us choose the projects. And then as we get serious, it's kind of like, okay, other people are going to get involved now, right? It's not just the two of you dating. The whole family needs to be on board with this. And so something we realized was Ying was working very closely with our research director, Joe, but Ella and I hadn't been really communicating. So Ella does operations and fundraising and kind of that side.
Project management.
Yeah, the project management side with Good Growth. I do fundraising and operations on my side, and we hadn't been communicating. So it's like, oh, we got to get these people talking. So that's something that was a takeaway for us and could be for all of you is who needs to talk to each other. It's not necessarily obvious at first. It might be like, oh, this campaign lead needs to talk to this campaign lead, or this programs person is going to talk to this programs person. But what about the operations people? What about fundraising together? What about marketing? How are we going to roll this out? You don't really have a comms person, but if you did, they would talk to our communications manager, Jenna. And so it's really important to think about who all needs to talk, because communication is absolutely the key to a successful collaboration, and not just a one-way street communication. The whole org needs to be involved at a certain point. And then just so I don't forget your question about kind of branding and where do our reports live, a mistake that we made at Faunalytics was not co-branding sooner. So as the relationship got more serious, we realized,
Just share names.
yeah, we should take on each other's names at this point. And so when we produce reports, it's all about Faunalytics and Good Growth now. It's not a Faunalytics report with Good Growth as the lead author. It's really a joint effort that we did together. And so that was something that evolved in our partnership as well. So how are you going to roll out whatever you're working on with your collaborator? And is it fair? And does it accurately represented how you worked on this project together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both a fairness and branding thing, but sometimes it's also a practical consideration. So I was at AVA, and we had launched this international strategy study, and people were saying, so we actually led this study, but because it was branded under Faunalytics, everybody was like, oh, here's this Faunalytics study, and we have all these questions, but they're not in the room, so I guess we can't ask them. And I'm like, I actually did this study. And I think we might lose out on a lot of opportunities because people don't know that we actually work on these things together. So we actually have more, you multiply by 2 the opportunities at least to actually talk about it and engage with people around the research or the projects that you're working on.
And that's something too, like how is the communication around that? Is there awkwardness with your collaborator around that kind of thing? Or can you be like, hey, should we be co-branding and bringing that up and hope? I actually don't even remember how it came up.
No, I was a little bit like, I'm not sure we can ask this, but it was a practical concern, so I raised it, and Joe was just like, okay, let's talk to Carl, who does who's content director, and it wasn't an issue at all. So I guess we did build a pretty strong foundation.
Yeah, it was kind of like, oops, we didn't think about that. So something I would think about is how are you going to roll out the project you're doing or the program you're doing, not just in the moment, but what's going to happen next, and how do you want to balance that?
Wow, the analogy, I love the analogy so much, and I hope you are enjoying it as well.
Yeah, we thought it might get out of hand, but I think so far so good. Nobody is like controversy. Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot to learn from this, right? Like there are so many factors that go into establishing this amazing, successful partnership, and both parties have to have certain level of investment and commitment, and that really looks like a romantic relationship. So the analogy was perfect. Thank you so much. And I think I have one question on the app that is kind of maybe related to what we were talking about conflicts. Relationships have conflicts, and you just talked about maybe some challenges that you face, but have you encountered any conflicts within your partnership? And if so, or maybe if you haven't already, how would you navigate those conflicts in the partnership between a local organization and international organization?
I don't know if it was so much of a conflict, but budget with one of our current studies. Would that be a good example? So again, Faunalytics is a bit larger than Good Growth, and so we have more fundraising connections, although I think you have a great relationship with funders now. But of course, a lot of funders in our movement are white Western US donors, and so I had the advantage of having those connections. So Faunalytics is the funder in this relationship, and in a recent study, we came across some issues where we were going over budget. And you brought it up with me, not Ella, right? Yeah. So Ying eventually brought it up in a very delicate way about going over budget and what we were going to do about it. And so that can be something that needs to be handled a little delicately depending on the collaboration. I am very comfortable talking about money, but that's not necessarily the case with everybody, and that can be very cultural as well as personal in terms of what you're comfortable talking about. So for me, it was no big deal. As soon as she talked about, oh, we're going over budget, I'm like, great, okay, let's figure out what we need to do about it. It's never like a great thing to go over budget, but it also wasn't an issue for me to troubleshoot the problem. So it wasn't so much a conflict as a real life issue that all of us undoubtedly encounter where money becomes a thing, and we figured out how to solve it to where we could complete the project without needing to pull too many more resources into it.
Yeah, I really cannot think of a time when we actually had a fight. I think I just like, I'm not trying to conceal anything. I like really don't think we had, but I do agree that like there are challenges around personality. So I mean, in this particular case, like I think, you know, I guess Ella was more polite and also kind of like, we need to work within this budget because that's what we promised. And I'm more like, no, let's explore all the possibilities. So even, this is not even a cultural thing because like, you know, we're both from Hong Kong actually. So there is definitely a personality piece of it. I think another type of personality thing that I encountered is, so Jo is very direct, and sometimes just in the research, like in her review, it's just like, I don't understand this. And you can read a lot of things. And this is so typical of relationships, right? Like your partner sends a text and it's just like they're like running out the door. And so they just need to send you 3 words and you're like, oh my God, are you mad at me right now? And so I guess maybe that goes back to a little bit of like the inner work. Sometimes, especially when you know there's like cultural or personality difference, it's probably helpful to just take a step back and think like, am I reading into this, or is this what it means? And then the other thing is, going back to the very first step, is can you be open with each other? So if there are constant issues here around, oh, I don't know what you mean, can you just raise that and have a discussion about it before you move on to the next stage of the relationship?
I think with conflict, something we didn't really touch on yet, but it is practical advice, is you need to get things in writing. Even though we have a lot of trust with each other, we are 2 separate organizations, and especially in the beginning phase where we haven't worked together yet, there needs to be an agreement about who's responsible for what, who ultimately has say over what, and that can be kind of a delicate thing to discuss, but it's much better to discuss it and to agree to it up front before the conflicts arise, because then you fall back to the agreement. So we do have agreements to this day that are in writing that we signed together, and I think that's something that I would advise everyone to do. It's very formal feeling and maybe it feels a little icky, but it is important so that you're not angry in the moment and not able to figure those things out in the moment. So getting those things in writing, I think, is important. And then you made me think of it with your example. We haven't done this together, but at Faunalytics, we actually have documents called How to Work With Me, and each staff member fills out a 1-page How to Work With Me document. And one section of that is your personality style and whether or not you like receiving criticism in a certain way, or my document says I'm very direct. It's like period, which is kind of funny. It's like there's no nuance or elaboration there. And so that's something maybe that people could consider too, is do you need a How to Work With Me document with this organization so that you just know that there aren't misunderstandings in the subtext?
Yeah, that's interesting. We actually, at AAA, I don't want to talk too much about our organization, but we actually have the personal, what do we call personal? I can't remember the name, but similar to what you have about, you know, how we prefer to receive feedback and constructive criticism, accessibility needs and things like that. So I highly recommend having those and share it with the partners as well. But speaking of the budget, and kind of the power balance between the 2 orgs. There was one question asked from the audience. A lot of international collaboration often occurs between organizations from the West and the East, with funding often coming from the Western counterparts. How can an organization working in Asia, much smaller, maybe less powerful, less resourceful organization, push back against Western expectations of how things should be done? I think when there is that kind of expectation, and maybe not necessarily in your partnership, but when there is such an expectation, how can Asian or local organizations stand up for themselves?
I feel like I have some experience of this, but not exactly because I'm not sure. Okay, I'll just go ahead and say it. Earlier on, when I was working in the space, like trying to introduce qualitative research, so yeah, into the space, I did find quite a bit of pushback from Western donors, and I don't know if I have a secret answer to this. Like, I think for me, it's engaging in a conversation. So not just trying to, I don't know, do an email back and forth or something, just having an actual conversation one-on-one. This may be easier said than done, because obviously it's much harder for us to get to these international conferences and have FaceTime with them in the West. But in my case, I actually just got on a call, like a Zoom call, and I tried to lay out the case for why I think it should. So the first study that I ever did was a mixed method. So it's a qualitative sort of ethnographic study. Oh, this is like technical terms. We basically observed how Chinese people ate food, prepared food, bought food. How did they think about this? And then we took this and did a survey to identify the different types of consumers in China for plant-based foods. And the donor was like, I don't know why you need to do this qualitative piece. Like, why can't you just do the survey? It's so much more efficient. And I try to explain that because, first of all, when you are entering into a new market that you don't know what questions to ask. And a really good example that comes up a lot, I think, is like diet categories. So Western diet categories is like vegan, vegetarian, maybe pescatarian, flexitarian, and then that doesn't work very well in Asian context because you have so many different cultures and religions that will eat certain types of meat and not others. So first of all, that is very hard for people. You cannot reflect that in a normal categorization. The idea of pescatarian is also not necessarily very popular, and we also often will have people tick things, and then later on when they ask them what meat they eat, so they'll be like, I'm vegetarian, but I eat fish. And it's like, it just doesn't work. And so if you don't do the qualitative element, you can't know that. I feel I'm going into a qualitative research rant. Anyway, but when I presented that, and I think I also maybe have given some examples of in other movements or in other fields, how this has been applied and the types of answers we would get that we wouldn't know if we only did it the way that they were used to. I think that then made them shift their perspective. And maybe they start out giving you a little bit of money to try this new method. And if you can show the results, then you can get more. I think to some extent, this was also true with us, because I think we were proposing some new approaches to doing things. Most recently, this like social media listening study, totally a thing that happens in business, but doesn't really happen in academic research. And we really had to work together to figure out how can we add that level of rigor in. But I think since we've experimented with so many different methods in the past, I think we now have established that trust to like commit a little bit more time, money into some of these things that are a little bit more exploratory as well. I hope that answered that question. It was a long answer.
I would also just add, and I'm talking more about major funders in our movement, not necessarily individual donors. The Western funders that I am familiar with are actually okay with being pushed back against. I know it doesn't feel like you always, there's a scariness that comes with pushing back against a funder, and there's, of course, a little bit of an advantage I have. Like, I recognize that I am probably better positioned to push back against a funder, but the funders in our movement who are giving 5 and 6 figures, from my experience, they are okay with being challenged, and they want to know why you're doing what you're doing. And if you have an answer to that, especially one that you can back up with data or impact, they're generally pretty open to that. That's not necessarily always the case, but I would say try to be empowered by your expertise and use our recent international study on needs and strategies to kind of back that up, where we have recommendations for funders. So it's not just you saying, hey, you need to listen to us, we're the local experts on this, but there's actually data talking about why that's important. So for what it's worth, and I'm happy to talk about this more afterward or during the rest of the conference if anyone has questions about the funder dynamic and how to approach that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I feel like from what I'm hearing, trust is such a foundational part of how your partnership has been so successful, like how you can bring up concerns and certain aspects of what's working, what's not working for you. So I would like to hear, what are the like secret sauce to your successful partnership? How have you been kind of being able to build this such a wonderful partnership between the two organizations?
Yeah, so I think if start off with the foundation, I've already mentioned a few of these things. So like we have the personality match is important. It's not just a strategic consideration about, strengths and weaknesses. The people have to get along. Like, the trust is based on that, right? I think the second part is, yes, then once you have that, whether you're able to be open in your communication. Can you take feedback? And probably especially for the party that has more power, like how do they respond when you push back? That's a really big signal. And then I think the third part is commitment. So as I mentioned, like when things are not working, how does your partner respond? Are they running away? Are they blaming you? Are they putting all the work on you to solve the problem? Like those are all red flags, toxic relationship. And then once you have that foundation, I think the second thing to think about is like what drove the growth of this partnership. And I think that's where comparative advantage is really key. So at the beginning, our relationship was built on the fact that we had different geographical expertise. And then I think it emerged more that our methodology, so our skill set became important. So we started doing qualitative, not just for the Asia studies, but also for international studies. And then the thing that has come up very recently is actually the differences in our size. So, okay, one thing that like Brooke actually had mentioned in the past, so she also freaked out about another issue, which was like, oh, we are like Faunalytics is so big and like we have a board to be accountable to and there's all these processes, we're so slow, like is good growth gonna like break up with us?
I thought you were going to abandon us.
Yeah.
Like you are nimble and small and there's a certain flexibility that comes with organizations like that. And I do have a little bit of tape to navigate and people to get approval on. And so that was something, you were panicking about something and I was panicking about something else. And it turns out that you understand.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously there's advantages of them being large. They have this infrastructure, they have these donor relationships that we get to leverage. They have a comms team, or at least a comms person right there that we can leverage. So we don't have to do all the distribution. But then what do we bring is that we are small and we can quickly try different things. Like we can try these different methodologies, bringing stuff from the business world into the advocacy world. We're trying some new things around how do we get people to apply the research by running these new workshops where we're integrating findings and then having our stakeholders brainstorm and apply those findings. Like for Brooke to maybe get approval for like all these new ideas, it might take a lot of time, but for us, we can just do it. And then if it works, then they get to have an idea that is already tested, a little bit de-risked to present to the board. And that might make it a lot faster actually for these larger organizations to get new ideas passed through. So complementarity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So you have like such a complementary relationship, and now it sounds like you are maybe in the marriage stage, where from what you said about having the co-branding on your studies. So now you have entered in that partnership stage. What's next for you two?
I think something that I'm really excited about is we really want good growth to be part of our strategic planning process. So started off as them just doing a contract for us, then it moved on to them being a lead on a project, and then it became involving them in our research selection process. And now we want their brains in our strategic planning, not just for our original research program, but for our entire organization and all of the programs we do and how we can do better in terms of supporting the global movement. So that's something where I want Ying to feel a little bit of power in terms of the future of Faunalytics, especially as it pertains to our international growth and what we do. So next year when we have strategic planning sessions, Good Growth is going to be have a seat at that table and be a part of that. As Ying said, we're experimenting with Research to Action Labs, which was a brainchild of Ying's, and she's going to be piloting that on one of our studies that we did, and hopefully also teaching some of our team members how we might do that with other studies that we're doing maybe without them. And I think that's something to think about too, is even though maybe we're in an organizational marriage at this point, we also have our independent things too. Like we are two separate organizations. Ying is pursuing a bunch of brilliant ideas. We still have our own team and programs. And so it's about, okay, where are you an independent person and where do your passions align? And we also have Country Profiles project that is being worked on now, so stay tuned for that. We are gathering data related to a given country at a time so that advocates have everything they need in one spot. And then who knows what's next? I don't know, a baby? A future Faunalytics good growth branch in Asia, I'm not sure, but the important thing is we're talking about the future together. We're figuring out where is good growth going, where is Faunalytics going, where are we going to do our own thing, and where do we intertwine? And communication is key to that.
Wow, very exciting. I will definitely keep an eye out for your baby between the two
Our
organizations,
babies.
the babies, perhaps. Okay, so I have a few questions that might be interesting to tackle. So one of them, one question was asked from the audience: how does one address the vast cultural and traditional diversity to curate successful international collaborations? And then I know that you've already addressed some personality aspects and some cultural aspects too, when it comes to especially the local expertise and knowledge. But when it comes to even like work styles or certain, I don't know, social cultural norms in terms of bringing up things about money and having a conversations about certain things. How do we navigate those cultural maybe differences? Maybe this is a big question. I feel like I asked too many questions. How do we navigate, I guess, cultural differences in terms of, I guess, understanding of partnership in general? Let's go with that.
Well, I definitely think it's on us as the Western org in power to do a little bit of homework, right? To have a sense of the landscape we're entering and a little bit of cultural awareness and sensitivity in that regard. I don't know how much that's been obvious or not apparent to you one way or the other, but we do try to make sure all of our research scientists, for example, have time and encouragement to learn more about whatever they're about to study. So that we make sure we're not just going in with assumptions and ignorance about a given topic. But in terms of the actual collaboration, I think it goes back to respect. And if you are going about collaborating with an organization and you don't feel that, then maybe that's a one and done, and you keep swiping. I don't know. What do you think, Joy?
It's hard because I don't think we really had these conflicts. I think maybe the idea of like having how to work with me kind of thing, that makes sense. Maybe just like having project, like a partnership review, like you would have a performance review, could be something to try. I don't know, my partner is a different culture, like my romantic partner is a different culture, and we just literally fight. So I think that could also work, but the point is, like, I think the point is that there's an explicit communication. Nobody should be harboring resentment. And if you feel like that's happening, then there's a problem in your relationship.
Yeah, definitely. The communication is definitely key. It looks like for any kinds of relationships. Oh my goodness, I was going to say something and then I just flew away. But yeah, please send us more questions if there's any. There are one questions about how do we foster an environment where competition among organizations can be avoided. So I think when it comes to partnership, there are maybe some levels of competition over taking credits or even money as well. So is there any way to avoid those kind of different interests or maybe address like different needs in that partnership?
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit with co-branding and fairness there. A trend I'm noticing, at least in the United States, I'm not sure if it's the case here, but there is more a growing network of support with one another happening, where we are getting to know each other. So executive directors are getting to know other leaders, communications managers are getting to know other communications managers, ops people with ops people. And this is a shift, I think, from maybe how it was a decade or so ago, where it's all about what you're accomplishing, not what you're accomplishing together. And it may be a slow shift, but I think it's actually one where it would benefit all of us in the movement to be leaders in this way. Being able to say we collaborated with this organization and did something together and deserve equal credit for it is actually, I think, well received. So I think any type of infighting over who gets credit for what is slowly becoming something that's like not looked at well. So I know that's slow change and not a perfect answer, but we are responsible for changing the competitive mindset in our movement. And it's not going to change unless we're all vocal about, hey, we're all in this together and we can't pin each other against each other. Funding is, of course, quite finite in our movement at the moment. But again, from my experience with funders, they actually like to see collaboration. They're asking about it in their grant applications. And I think it actually behooves us to say, we did this with this organization. It makes us look better.
I think maybe on a micro level, like individual organizations, I think there's probably value in just like coming together and mapping out what everyone is doing and also being really clear on what your comparative advantage is. So I think for us, we could have we could have kind of easily just stayed in the research lane. But I think we realized over time that actually our advantage is not really in producing lots of studies or being great, really prolific researchers, but more in figuring out how to get things off the ground, right? So how do you build a network of Southeast Asian researchers so that you can launch these regional studies? How do you test these new methodologies? How do you run a research to action workshop? But I think we are less well positioned to scale all of these different ideas. And so working with a bigger partner like Faunalytics who has more of these resources, my dream would be that we, I don't know, have the baby together and then Mama Fauna then takes care of the kid and then I can go, I knew the metaphor was gonna break apart.
Let's flip that. The dad fauna maybe takes care at home, takes care of the baby at home. And mama good
entrepreneurial mom
exactly,
will go.
exactly.
Yeah, okay. Something like that.
Okay, amazing. Okay, great. So we're almost time. Is anyone have any questions? I don't know if we can take questions from the floor as well. I think I ran out of the questions on the app. But maybe in the meantime, is there any exciting projects, either collaboratively? I know you've kind of shared collaborative projects that are coming up, but if there's any projects individually that you're working with that you would like to share with the audience?
So something exciting on our side is that we are launching microsites for Faunalytics in different languages. So we just launched the other day a microsite for Faunalytics in simplified Chinese and one in Spanish. And so we're working really hard to make research more accessible. We make sure that our research isn't behind a paywall, but we also want to make sure that it's understandable to everybody. And so we're translating our research and we're working hard to make it kind of tailored to each audience. So instead of having to sift through all of our English language research, it's all going to be right there for you. So that's something that I'm really hopeful we can continue to do and something to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, I think on our side, I'd mentioned earlier that we got demand to use the research and do more strategy work. So that's something we're expanding. We've worked with a corporate in Southeast Asia to work on their all-protein strategy by taking our insights from our consumer studies. We're actually working with also, AA Asia to help with their strategy development. So yeah, we're excited to see where this can go. And if your organization is looking for support on strategy design, especially in applying all of these different insights across all of these studies that we've done, Faunalytics has done, and many other organizations have done, please reach out to us and we can see if we can help.
Yeah, awesome. Actually, there was a question about one person asked, I love the research and collaborations that you're doing. Is there any training or consultation open for helping out smaller organizations who want to conduct research yet lack the knowledge to start it? So I mean, you've already kind of talked about what services are available, but is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of what kind of support you can offer in terms of research?
Yeah, so Faunalytics hosts free office hours where advocates can come and talk to us one-on-one about conducting your own research, whether it's finding data or conducting a study. And what I would say is if our office hours don't work for you in terms of time zone, please just reach out to us and we'll schedule a time that works for you. We don't want that to be a barrier to supporting you. So if you need help conducting research, whether that's survey design or even just getting started, we offer several hours of tailored one-on-one support per organization per year, and we would love to help you.
And then if you want to commission research, i.e. you want somebody to do the research for you, then please feel free to reach out to us. I think we already have a lot of studies that we've done, so we can do replications of existing studies into different markets, different countries. We also, as I mentioned, have this network of local researchers, so you don't have to go out and find them yourselves. And that allows us to do regional research much more easily. We also work with like larger research organizations. I think based on this partnership, we also have some interest from other research organizations who are based internationally but want to do research in Asia. So yeah, that's another area where we're looking to expand in. So yeah, just reach out to us if we can be of any help.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and your information is available on website, and they can probably reach out to you on Hoover Up as well if you want to get some support in terms of research. And yeah, I think we're at time. This was such a fun session, and I'm so honored to be part of this and
Thanks,
listening
Kaho.
to
Thank you, Kaho.
learning about different stages of your relationship. So yeah, I hope you got a lot of insights into how to establish successful partnership. And yeah, I think you will hang around maybe around the stage if you have any questions. So thank you everybody so much for coming, and yeah, thank you.
Thank
To the
you.
speakers as well.